Before Tango Gameworks became popular with their breakout hit Hi-Fi Rush, which is one of the most unique rhythm action games, not to mention having one of the best waifus of 2023, they started their video game portfolio in the horror game genre, which all began with The Evil Within. A series that adapts many elements of the horror games that came before it, it was led by one Shinji Mikami, whose previous works include creating the first Resident Evil game, Dino Crisis, Vanquish, and Shadows of the Damned.
Now that is a big boner.
Huh?
His former works on the horror game genre helped shape the overall features in The Evil Within, or Psycho Break, for those who didn't know what the Japanese title was, which is much cooler if I'm being honest. But the elements of the action survival horror genre are plenty to be found in this game. Item and health management, powerful and frightening enemies, one very attractive yet modest female waifu, a dark and mysterious story, gore and body horror that will make your favorite slasher villain blush, and you've got a cocktail for a very action-packed survival horror game. While not rising to the praise that is often found with Shinji Mikami's previous works, particularly Resident Evil 4, The Evil Within was still a fun survival horror game that fans of the genre got to enjoy. While some of the criticisms were directed towards the gameplay and design mechanics that made some segments feel a little rough, the atmosphere was still unlike any other. A world that's confusing, macabre, twisted, and bleak, The Evil Within delivered a bone-chilling experience for fans of the horror game genre. So, after 10 years, a direct sequel, a Tokyo horror simulator, one of the best rhythm action games to date, plus best girl over here, right here you see, and some other amazing horror games that we've got to experience over the past couple of years, how was Tango Gameworks' first game after all this time? Well, let's take a look with a short retrospective visit to The Evil Within. The game starts off by putting you in the shoes of one Sebastian Castellanos, who works as a detective in, and this is pretty on the nose, Crimson City, with a K by the way. Responding to a distress call at Beacon Mental Hospital, okay, I forgot how subtle this game isn't trying to be, Sebastian and his team are sent in to investigate. And right off the bat, I forgot that this game played with a letterbox. For those of you who have never played this game on day one, The Evil Within was shipped on PC with the letterbox aspect ratio, as well as a lock to 30 frames per second. While a part of me would have been okay with it on the consoles at the time, having to play it on a modern PC did not make for a great visual experience. I believe I did originally finish the game on PC with the 30 FPS letterbox experience, but oh boy did it feel extremely slow. Thankfully, they later patched the game to run at 60 frames per second, as well as removing the letterbox, so now it looks more like a proper game than a movie. Anyway, going back to it, I will say that the introductory visuals are very nice. The model details look better than normal for most games that are hitting the 10-year-old mark, but my goodness, do the rain effects look pretty good. The literal drip that you see on the characters is obvious, but the drenching effect that you see on character clothes is impressive, making Sebastian's coat look darker and heavier, and Kidman's thin white t-shirt a little more transparent. Looking respectfully, of course. One quick investigation and horror transition later, Sebastian is quickly isekai'd to another world.
Hey, you.
Oh sorry, wrong game. Upon waking up, the world takes a complete 180, and you're stuck in a Jigsaw-esque room, and Sebastian has to sneak his way out. Hey, Sebastian, there's a wire on the floor right there. You could just use okay, never mind.
Shit.
Well, good luck to you. You know, you could just finish him off there, right? Oh, anyway. Hobbling his way to freedom and dodging some traps, Sebastian makes a short escape for now. Well, at least he's not losing blood anytime soon. A short limping segment later, and Mr. Chainsaw is back for another consultation. Here the game actually reinforces the concept of sneaking by allowing players to be able to hide in lockers and find alternate ways to bypass tougher enemies, which is something that you can actually utilize in later parts of the game. Though I initially failed the first sneak check.
Shit.
Well, time to juke. Alright, let's just get this over. Ooh, that's pretty gruesome. Wait, why does this feel familiar? After one more final limping escape, the title drop, failed ambulance cinematic, and some brain therapy, the core gameplay loop was finally introduced. Both direct combat with guns and melee, as well as sneaking, are your primary means to dispatch enemies. As per usual for survival horror, you have a limited number of resources that you have to manage, alongside a host of oppressive enemies that you have to carefully take down with the limited resources that you have. This is very Resident Evil Shinji Mikami at his core again. Heck, even the first common enemy is a direct nod to the first Resident Evil game. After getting reacquainted with Sebastian's gameplay, and laughing about how he can also stomp the yard like Isaac Clarke, it was time to take on the world. General game plan was pretty much just to prioritize stealth whenever possible, and use guns if my cover was blown, which worked pretty well most of the time, but the game definitely emphasizes the direct combat more so. There's also a number of environmental traps that you have to look out for. Alrighty, just gotta make sure I look out for these wire traps. Oh, I see that we have some bear traps to consider as well. Hey, wait a minute. It's actually quite astounding how much the evil within borrows heavily from RE4. I guess Shinji Mikami just can't seem to really let it go. Anyway, it was time to take care of the main part of the village and progress the game forward. Oh, whoops, wrong game. Well, at least the bomb traps are completely different from RE4, which give you parts to make ammo for your crossbow if you disable it. Alright, stopping the needle in the blue zone with one rotation with some trap, yada yada yada. Alright, I think I got this. Oh wait, we started already? Wait, what? A little more notice would have been nice. A bit similar to RE4, you also get an upgrade system. When you're in the asylum or safe room, you get to go to the upgrade chair to spend your collected green gel, I just call it goo, on various upgrades like health, ammo, and guns. Since there's not enough goo points to upgrade everything in a single run, you'll have to carefully choose where you want to make the most meaningful upgrades for you. I do like this system, since it means that different players can emphasize different playstyles. Except for stealth upgrades. For some reason, that was left out of the equation. There's also a room full of safes that you can unlock by destroying these mini statues to get the key. They're full of goodies that can help you, like ammo and goo, so it helps to keep an eye out. After getting to the main gate, and realizing that it was locked, Sebastian made the not-so-subtle judgment of needing
Maybe a chainsaw or something.
And cue the mini-boss fight. Oh sorry, wrong game again. Though some might think the enemies that can one-shot you are a little cheap, I kind of like the thrill of not trying to get hit while evading the mini-boss from touching you, not to mention making use of potential traps and areas to your advantage. Alright, just gotta lose him in the building. Sebastian, please.
Hello there.
I know you're tired right now. Really, Sebastian?
That's rough, buddy.
Well, I know where my goo upgrades need to go. Cardio, apparently. After finally putting Mr. Chainsaw out for good, the main village section was done. Well, at least you have a nice chainsaw to work with now, Okay, never mind. Afterwards, you start to learn a bit more about some of the characters who are also stuck in this nightmare, like Dr. Jimenez, Leslie, and more so the main villain Ruvik, who I like to describe as your typical edgelord trying to sound cool villain. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he mains Reaper, Dual Blades, and is a light Yagami fan. Hey, where you going, Ruvik? Let's chat for a bit. Oh my Bloodborne that's not yet on PC. Well, I guess we're underground now. Wonder what's open. Oh my God! So this enemy type, known as Lara, is by far the scariest monster that this game has to offer. The multi-limbed creature, along with the Ju-on and Sadako straight black hair, is one of the most nightmare-fueled things I've definitely seen. That's actually something I really like about this game, is how creepy and terrifying the monster designs are, and they really nailed how scary they look. Oh hey Ruvik, you know, you don't seem so scary compared to Lara. Well, that's just not fair. Well, Sebastian, it was nice knowing you. Guess you had a good run. Okay, wait, that is a pretty cool transition. That's also another thing that I love about this game, is how good the atmosphere and ambience are with setting the tone. The claustrophobic areas, the shifting locations, and lack of logical connections really do make it feel like you're going crazy. Speaking of crazy, meeting these invisible assholes drove me crazy, and not in the good Cthulhu kind of way. It's one thing that they have completely invisible silhouettes, it's another when they will take almost 1/3 of your health away, only to scurry back to being invisible again. You have to make use of the environment in order to help pinpoint where they are exactly, but sometimes the rooms don't have enough stuff for you to use, and the fact that your guns aren't completely accurate to your reticule means you will also miss most of the time. But thanks to the power of shotgun spread and doors, killing them was much easier. Soon after came the first puzzle of the game. Most of the ones throughout the game looked visually thematic and cool, but none of them were too complicated. They simply involve looking at images and pictures that you have to deduce based on your surroundings. The game does make it very anxiety-inducing as the dramatic music ramps up to eventually show whether you were successful or not. Oh hey Joseph, don't worry, I won't tell anyone that you bathed with your clothes on. Next up, it was time to save Kidman. It is quite nice when there are a few combat sections where you can just go all out on the enemies, and they'll at least drop ammo for you to replenish your resources. That way, you're not entirely left hung out to dry. Also, I do like how snappy Sebastian moves around normally, so despite enemies being stronger overall, maneuvering always felt good.
Watch out! They've got dynamite!
Wait a second.
Leave me alone!
Alright Kidman, we got you out. Now let's get out of here. Oh, come on. I want to join in too. Whee! Alright Sebastian, what did we get ourselves into? Also, really game, a mini statue on a flying bird. Well, it was time for the first fight encounter with Lara, and it's a really hot one. Since she can pretty much one-shot grab you within kissing range, you gotta play your best juke game in order to try and burn her with various traps around the arena. Now, I did only die once in this encounter, since I remembered how her boss fight worked. But, I will admit, I did die a significant amount the first time I fought her 10 years ago, and it was definitely a lot of trial and error. After burning her away, I was rewarded with more plot points to the story. See, at this point, it's heavily hinted that we're stuck in the deranged mind of someone, and everyone else that is connected is basically experiencing the same psychological nightmare. I wonder who that could be. But the game progressed as normal, and it was time to be introduced to the holdout section of the game, where you have to kill a bunch of enemies while waiting for Joseph to finish unlocking a door. Now wait. Holding out in a building? Enemies coming through the windows? Waiting for the waves to finish? Where have I seen this before? Well, Mikami-san, at least you made the section better, right? While I thought the holdout segment was a rather fun shooting gallery in RE4, in the EVA Within, it's really rough. A lot of the enemies coming through the window and the ceiling in the second portion are very overwhelming. It doesn't help that they will also target Joseph as he's trying to open the door, and you have to babysit him in order to keep progression. It's not the most well designed if I'm being honest, and even trying to use the environmentals around the room feels very janky to use. But after finally getting through, I was rewarded with a sniper rifle and a trip to the asylum.
Nope.
Well, at least I got one of these things. The next section involved wiping out a bunch of enemies, as well as killing a few jerks who were shooting at me from afar, with what looks like to be a Gatling barrage of harpoons. Well, at least Shinji Mikami had to make it a little different from the catapults of RE4. Now that that's settled, it was time to move on. Oh, come on, him again? Alright, down boy. No more chainsaw for you, we're done. A few more fodders to shoot at later, the twins of the cemetery command grabbing me with the weirdest glitch I've ever seen, rescuing Velma Dinkley's glasses from a demon pupper.
Jinkies!
It was time to visit the ruins of the game for one of my favorite bosses, the Keeper. He's actually my favorite boss in the entire game, in both his visual design and gameplay mechanic. Thematically, he looks menacingly cool, and he has allusions to Ruvik's past. In his boss fight, I really like the idea of him being an ever-present threat, while Sebastian tries to keep himself from dying to the poison gas. It's impossible to completely kill him since you're on a timer, and he constantly respawns from the various heads that are present in the area, so you have to manage fighting him and using the valves to stop the poison gas from killing you. It's a very stressful but fun boss fight for me, and the only real complaint that I have is the strobe effect that happens when he respawns, which really triggers my eyeballs. When you finally beat him, he gives you one last goodbye before you end it. Kiss me, you fool. Moving on to the next area, being genuinely disgusted by a bunch of mini alter egos coming through the wall, yeesh, and failing to run away from a giant amalgam because running in a straight line off angle with WASD is very awkward. It was time to return above ground and head to Ruvik's mansion, where we got to perform some very gross puzzle experiments, as well as play a game of tag with Ruvik himself. You'll never catch me, Ruvik! Also, RE4 fans, here's another callback for you. Just like the puzzle of the paintings in the castle section of RE4, there's a puzzle in the Evil Within that involves knowing the number of people in the painting. Add that to the RE4 counter, if you will. A later trip down memory lane in Ruvik's mind, and getting chased by a red-spotted man, reveals the motive behind Ruvik and why he's going on a murderous experimental rampage. Also, let's welcome everyone's favorite creature, Lara. The final boss encounter with her is extremely tough, as you have to dodge her in a small enclosed area while trying to open up a pathway by turning off all the fires. I managed to not actually die in this section, but for most people, and including myself playing this section for the first time, you die a lot, since there's a lot of trial and error with where the handles are. I'm honestly not the biggest fan of this section's gameplay, since you have to constantly juke Lara in such a tight quarter, and while I'm happy with Sebastian's controls, juking doesn't really feel like the most natural thing to do in my opinion. In any case, after you finally make your escape and disarm 2 out of her 4, you get to see Ruvik being edgy and one more plot reveal before facing down a giant amalgam. Nothing special about this boss fight honestly, as all you really have to do is shoot and dodge, though I commend Sebastian for being able to take concrete to the face like a champ.
'Tis but a scratch.
With that out of the way, it was time to see the top side and realize that the enemies can now wield assault rifles. What? I kind of get it though, since your current weapons can pretty much take out all of the common enemies very easily, so the game needs to provide you with some higher degree of difficulty in order to keep you pressured. This section also introduces you to the most left field monster, which is a water monster. Design-wise, it looks creepy and menacing, but gameplay-wise, it feels a little too obligatory, and its only purpose is to be present in the 2 or 3 segments that they're featured in, and afterwards, you never see it ever again. After Sebastian finished taking a dip in sewer water, the game testing your sneaking ability, and a school bus section that was really off the rails, or technically on the rails, we were close to the end of the game. One building section full of enemies and a rematch with Mr. Keeper, the game gave me one more new boss before the finale, and it's a weird, invisible tentacle creature. Honestly speaking, this boss feels like a very last-minute decision to include him in the game before it shipped. His gameplay fight isn't bad per se, but it's his inclusion in the game that feels very forced, mainly because he suddenly appears out of nowhere, whereas bosses like Lara and the Keeper have thematic build-ups to their confrontation. At the finish line, the game gave me one more gauntlet of enemies to fight, 2 Keepers to brawl against, and a don't get seen by Ruvik section, before bringing you to the final boss fight of the game, which felt both outlandishly fun and somehow lackluster at the same time. You pretty much go through a running sequence, followed by an on-rail shooting section with a machine gun and a rocket launcher. Yep, it's very actiony at this point. After that, it's one final quick-time gunshot to the boss, and you've beaten the game. It's a little anticlimactic in terms of the gameplay portions, but the outlandish and over-the-top nature make it feel a bit humorous and actiony, which it does kind of nail. But if you're hoping for something a little more imposing and terrifying from the final boss, unfortunately this game will leave you wanting. The game finally ends with Sebastian making it out alive, and waiting for you to play his next game. Or the DLCs in fact, if you want to see Kidman's side of the story. Overall, The Evil Within was still a fun horror game to go through after all this time, but it does lack a bit of focus and some design parts that still keep it from being as great as it could have been. On the story side, it's serviceable for me, and it at least gives reasons for all the dramatic characters and personas, but it's obviously not going to be taking awards in terms of its writing. The world building and atmosphere, however, is something that the game absolutely nails. The dark, claustrophobic, convoluted, and grotesque environments, alongside the horrifying looking monsters, make the horror aesthetic of the game stand out. I think it's commendable for Tango Gameworks to tackle an ambitious project while being led by Mr. Resident Evil Mikami himself. A little rough around the edges, but I think horror fans can still find some fun to be had with The Evil Within 10 years later. In fact, coming from the RE4 remake, my favorite Silent Hill inspired video game of all time, The Evil Within was way more fun to play again 10 years later, and I liked it more than I did on release. But that's it for today, guys. Thanks for sticking around. There will be more games to play and more videos coming soon, so please stay tuned if you'd like to see more. For now though, I'll see you all next time.